Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of SMEs and Virtualization and Cloud. I'm Kong Yang with Solar Winds.
And I'm Todd Muirhead with VMware.
Hey, Todd.
Hey, Con.
Totally digging your Virtual Geek
Yeah.
shirt.
Yeah, so thanks for the shirt. This is the
You're
cool
welcome.
Solar Winds Virtual Geek shirt that Con gave me.
Do you want to show the back?
All the back.
Oh, yes. Todd is definitely 2ESXY, XC for his data center.
Yeah, so cool shirt. It's very comfortable, nice and soft,
Awesome. And, it's going to segue right into, from Virtual Geek to Virtual Todd
Yeah.
into our topic this week, RAID levels, and a discussion
Yes.
thereof.
An old-fashioned argument
Yes.
that's got some new wrinkles these days. So RAID 5 versus RAID 10 is what Kong and I were talking about just a little while ago. And so this is something that goes back a long ways. I mean, this is one of the very first kind of performance discussions I was probably a part of, when you start learning about storage arrays and using larger numbers of disks, right? So you too, right? I mean,
No,
we were both at Dell, and
exactly.
we did storage, not storage performance, but storage is a big part of the performance stuff we did back then.
RAID 5 and 10 always came up database side because of the trade-offs, right? So if you get down to what RAID 5 is, it's parity across with a parity drive, so you need 3 disk minimum.
Yeah, so it's in number of disks plus one extra, n plus one, and the extra disk is accounting for the fact that you got to have the parity, the error checking bit, so to speak, for your data. So with RAID 5, if you lose any one disk, then it can figure out what's going on with the remaining 4, and you don't lose any data.
Exactly. And then RAID 10, you have the stripe and then mirrored.
Right. So you have to have 2x the number of disks versus what you need for capacity. But it's a much simpler algorithm. There's no parity calculation, so it's a lot faster. That's the very simple way to do it. It's faster.
And you brought it up. RAID 10, the pros is performance. The cons are you have your capacity.
Yeah.
RAID 5, you get that extra capacity, but performance penalty.
Yeah, there's extra
overhead.
There's this extra overhead for doing the RAID 5 basically. So that's always been the trade-off. And going back forever, people have always decided to use RAID 5 for database in some cases because they needed the capacity. From a cost perspective or just a sheer, just strictly a capacity issue, you had to go with RAID 5. And it would be okay, right? But if you needed the performance, absolutely, then you would have to go with RAID 10 even though you're having your capacity.
And that's part of the discussion that has arisen in the Black community is when do you transition into these large, what is the stepping point to go from RAID 5 to RAID 10? And it kind of depends because you have tackled some of the largest database customers, deployments, instantiations, during your time both at Dell and at VMware. And for your latest, Monster VM setup with you were using groups of RAID 5, but there was a caveat with that.
Yeah, so I used RAID 5 for this last database test I did with Oracle, but the reason I was able to do that is because I was using all flash disks for my RAID 5 arrays. Not arrays, so what I did was I had four disk groups that were RAID 5 LUNs, and each of those I believe had 5 disks, so 4 plus 1. And I was driving the biggest VM I could create on the host, which was 120 vCPUs. Not an extreme amount of IOPS. I think the total was around 20,000 IOPS or so. But I needed these IOPS to be very low latency in order to be able to drive the CPUs up and not have any waiting. So all of the latency was well under half a millisecond. So, not a high number, but for that type of latency, pretty high. Anyway, so that was all with RAID 5. And I needed to do that because I needed the capacity in order,
You
to,
needed
be
the
able, in order to
capacities.
be able to store enough data to run the test. But for my logs, which aren't nearly as big as the data, I was able to use the RAID 10 with some spinning disks, because spinning disks can get pretty good sequential I/O, which is what the logs are.
Mhm.
So a combination of knowing the...
So Todd, you did RAID 5 for the database and then RAID 10 for your logs. What that tells me is you basically did the planning and sizing beforehand and then decided what were the key performance things requirements that you needed.
Well, yeah, I mean, some of it is experience, right? Kind of knowing from running databases and these types of tests in the past that you can get good performance for logs, sequential access, from spinning disk and RAID 10
Mhm.
or RAID 1 if they're small enough. And so I kind of started with that, and then, the RAID 5 on the flash disk I thought would be plenty based on how, how much IOs you can get from these flash disks these days. But what everybody has to do is when you do this initial profiling phase is to use some tools to go and verify that you're getting the performance that you need. And so I was using ESX top at the virtualization layer, and then also inside the VM in the guest, IOStat and Linux top to see those. And then finally Oracle, which is the database I was using, has lots of tools built in that are visual and have graphs and all kinds of cool stuff as well to verify from the database point of view that you're getting. That's what you really got to do at the end is to verify you're using tools that you're getting the performance that you need.
Exactly. And then your design decision, you had 5 arrays. You had 4 different RAID 5 arrays, correct?
Yeah, 4 different RAID 5 LUNs, and then 4, I think it was 4 RAID 10 LUNs as well for the logs.
Okay.
So it's all in the white paper if you want to get into the details.
No,
but yeah,
absolutely. And we'll have a link to Todd's white paper. I'd recommend you reading that, because it's a great start to thinking about how you would scale out to that kind of a size database in there.
Yes.
And talking about size, we've been talking about the NFL draft for a bit. And it's kind of leaked through the whole month of April. It should have already happened. We should already be projecting our teams and who's on it, who's not making it.
Be getting ready for the Cowboys Super Bowl that's coming up this year.
You mean the Hawks. And this time we're going to hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch, by the way. But it's leaked into the Mayweather and Pacquiao fight as well. So
which is going to be huge. It's crazy that they're going to overlap.
Almost as huge as you and I being on the show, on the road for shows.
Yep, I'm going to be at EMC World giving a presentation on performance there.
Awesome. I'm going to be at Microsoft Ignite. I got 2 theater presentations that I'll be doing.
That'll be cool.
As well, so awesome. Well, folks, let us know what you think about the RAID 10, RAID 5 debate. And no, it's not RAID 5 equals 2 times.
Not quite.
RAID
No.
10. Not quite. So until next time, see ya.
Yeah, thanks everybody.